Two. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Mariella Marie and I'm super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. This is my second opportunity to speak with our guest speaker today, who actually we had a chance to chit chat before pressing record here, and I'm actually closer to her hometown than she is. She's calling from Ottawa, Canada. Today, I'm calling from Patagonia, Argentina. She's originally from Chile. And so we've got, very big group joining us today from all over the world. So I just want to give folks a shout out so we can really just see the power of digital community. My speaker is calling from Canada. I'm calling from Argentina. We've got Buenos Aires, Argentina representing, Santiago, Chile representing, Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C. We've got Finland, we've got Georgia, we've got Montana. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and write in the chat box. Let us know where you're calling from, and I'll give you all a shout out in a little while as well. And with that said, because we are calling from all over, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules so that we can all feel comfortable and confident in this next hour. So of course, the world is on fire. Everything is broken. What a weather like this, right? So you're taking the time out of your busy day to be with us for the hour. And I really hope that, you can walk away with more knowledge, be empowered to share your knowledge. And with that said, we would love for you to participate. Participation is key for this next hour. So turn your cameras on whenever you feel called to do so. We believe in visibility here at Power to Fly. It just encourages folks to be themselves and to, show that we are diverse and we are a global community, which we're going to totally dive into later. So I don't want to spill too many of the beans now. I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise. But again, feel free to hop off mute when you want to share your voice. Otherwise, just write it in the chat box, your reflections, any questions that come to mind, any dreams that you had last night that you want to share. We welcome your participation. If you have any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, you can find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie, and you can write to me privately there, and I will flag your question or your reflection to our guest speaker and keep you anonymous. For you here on camera, that was the last thing, but I do want to invite everyone to be present with us. So I know we live in a world where everyone is multitasking, but I invite you to be present with us here so that you can rewatch this video later and then you can take notes vigorously there. I did get a private message saying that my audio was shutting off a little bit, so let me know if you need me to repeat anything. But in general, I'm saying I would love for you to participate, write in the chat box anytime you want to, turn your cameras on, hop off of mute, and follow us on socials. So I will just do a brief introduction of myself. So I have the pleasure of interviewing and picking the beautiful minds of women and non-binary people here on Power to Fly throughout the week. I love to speak about the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace. So I hope to bring, that awareness to this conversation as well. And I invite you all to go to thepositiveforceteam.org, which is a project I'm working on, and sign up for our newsletter so you can keep up with all the great things I've got in store there. Otherwise, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Marcella, who is calling from Ottawa, Canada. Marcella, let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. It's great to be back, I would say, with Power to Fly, because I'm an avid participant in many of your events. And I also had a great opportunity to join many other working Latinas, particularly at the recent Diversity Reboot conference that you hosted. So that kind of got me even more excited to partner with you, because I felt that the reach outs that I had following the conference, they were very thirsty for the message that I can share, which is my particular experience, having been a Latina, a minority, and an immigrant, always navigating different continents, different cultures, changing jobs, industries, making my life a big transition, and at the same time learning to empower myself to not compromise and mold myself to my employer, but really live in my own terms, speak my truth. And by doing so, always seeking fulfillment. And funny enough, that actually makes it easier for work, despite what we would think. So for me, it wasn't a conscious choice. It's been more of a journey. And this journey is taking me from, as I said in the intro, from having my own very little Emily in Paris time many years ago, to being in places like Canada, like Tunisia and North Africa, Spain, England, back and forth to Chile, living in Miami a few years. So all of that, it's been every time having to start from scratch, every time an opportunity to learn, to connect with new people, new cultures, and to really evolve as a person. That's one of my big drivers. That's why whenever I can share any sort of lesson learned that I have had with somebody else, nothing makes me happier. And when it comes to seeing minorities, in the corporate world particularly, I'm always interested in helping, because I believe sometimes when we leave our country of origin, we tend to go for the lower positions, sort of taking ourselves out of the competition from the get-go without doing the homework that might help us to really be at the top, or to just give ourselves the best chances to succeed. And that's one of the things that I've been able to kind of hone into. And I'm here today to share some of those tidbits with you, and hopefully inspire you to do better at work. But at the same time, because most of us, I can see for what is here are women, I would say that one of my biggest lessons learned is that as women, we're very multifaceted. And it's very important to accept and to nourish that aspect about us. That's what allows us to bring our full self to work. But more importantly, is what brings you the fulfillment. And that's what builds the confidence that attracts the success. So you don't have to look for it, because you can actually attract it. So I would say I'm here to help. I'm here to listen. So I'm all up for the questions.
What a beautiful introduction. And I know that you will be diving into your journey more as we roll through these questions. But I would love for you to just talk about the principal themes that we'll be walking through for the next hour.
Yes, absolutely. So we divided this on 3 topics that were very applicable here based on my experience and also from the questions that we got. So those 3 are going to be, as you see in there, how to navigate career transitions. Needless to say, with the reality that we're facing now, the uncertainty of COVID and the new world, it couldn't be more appropriate to be dealing with that. At the same time, my reality is that I've always been a minority, a Latina, the one that didn't speak the language of the place that I moved to, or when I change industries. So that's very important to mention. And also how much being yourself is probably, at least in my opinion, the best antidote to beat imposter syndrome, insecurities, anything that you're dealing with. You need to figure out how to nourish yourself, so that by doing that, you can face the world and the opportunities that come.
Yes, I love that. And so just because I'm obsessed with speaking about emotional intelligence, that all just rings true to, self-awareness, building a practice so you can continue to become self-aware regardless of where you are in the world. And also to be socially aware, right? So to have the people skills to know, for example, if I move to another country and maybe I don't have, the things that maybe a native in that country would have, I still need to value myself as, all the experience that I bring, all of my journey, bring that all to the table so that I can practice more self-awareness, empathy, motivation, all of these pillars that are within emotional intelligence. So I love that you're actually touching on one of my favorite topics. With that said, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to dive into the questions that you all have submitted offline. So feel free to either put your screen in gallery mode so you can see everyone here with their cameras on, or you can keep it on where the live speaker so that you can see Marcela and myself here on the full screen. So let's start with this first question here. What was the pivotal moment that made you realize that being true to yourself was the best strategy for your professional career? And have you ever been backlashed for being yourself?
Yeah, I think what I remember as a sort of pivotal moment was when I was working in tech, and all my colleagues were actual engineers, PhDs, you name it. Some people have invented things. I got hired to work in technology, as I called it, my Emily in Paris moment, because I spoke French. That's all I had. I literally didn't know what my employer did. They said that never mind, we're desperate. We bought a company in France. We need somebody today. They tested me. They put me on the phone to Paris. and it worked. So they said, okay, you can handle it, stay, we'll teach you the rest. We got plenty of engineers that can do the rest. If you can help us, sort of smooth things out between America and Europe, we're good. So I was like, okay, I guess sometimes, you just have to go with the flow. But as soon as I went in, obviously insecurities, imposter syndrome started to creep out, because I actually didn't have the same background. Mine is languages and literature, and here am I working with all these techie people. And then for just by chance, I happened to find this article in the local newspaper. This was in Miami at the time. And it was called about the value of low-tech people in the high-tech world. And then finally, it's like light bulb moment. That's exactly what I am. I don't have to try and be like them. I bring other things to the table. So this was a huge encouragement, because I could finally quantify what my contribution was to the bottom line of that organization, and why they were so happy to see me. And I had to stop feeling like an imposter, because so far I thought, wow, they're flying me to Paris all the time and all these things, and deep down I'm not an engineer. At some point they'll figure it out. But nobody cared. It was just me. So I would say that was a pivotal moment, because I didn't have to pretend to be who I wasn't. So it was extremely empowering. On the other hand, when you come to the question of the backlash, being who I am has cost me my fair share of backlashes. But I would say that my lessons from that is that those of us, and you mentioned emotional intelligence, that are in this path, this isn't there's not an end. It's a constant. But therefore we represent change, and change makes some people very uncomfortable. So you trigger them. And I'm old enough now to understand that. Before I took it personal, I would wonder what was wrong with me. Not that I am perfect, but now I can actually sense it, almost from an energetic, if you will, kind of way, where people are just uncomfortable. What it is that you are okay with your evolution. You are okay with maybe saying, I don't know what this is, but I'm willing to learn, or I don't understand something, and more about, tied to this, being your full self. But I think that's what it is this transparency, this speaking your truth. It's very difficult for some people to deal with, because it's like putting a mirror to what they're not doing with their life. So all you can do is give them blessings and wish them the best, and give advice if they want to, but never attempt to fix them, if you will. I've learned the hard way.
Oh, you're dropping so many gems, and I'm sure that folks can resonate with what you're saying. I see some smiling faces there. I want to just kind of gauge our live audience and just ask you all as well. Has there been a pivotal moment in your career, even if you're not, pivoting, but especially if you have pivoted, or if you lived in a different country? I just would like to hear from our live audience as well. And Marcela, thank you for sharing that part of your journey, for being so real with that response. So let's move to the next question here. So this question was submitted offline. What are the main cultural differences you struggled with as an immigrant?
As an immigrant, the main difference is that you are always the different one, the new one. There's usually a language component, just sort of trying to fit in. Whatever you had or thought you were somewhere else, you no longer have. So there's a sense of loss, of having to start over, and almost unfairness that comes to you. Now, in my case, because this has been a pattern that has been on repeat every 4 years or so, that I've changed places. It wasn't the plan originally, but that's what it's turned out to. First it was me, because I work for tech, and there were mergers and acquisitions and promotions and things like that. Now I share my life with a diplomat, so that throws another layer of this life where we're just going to be global citizens for the rest of our life. But what I learned is that once I understood that, yes, I was going to be the new one. Yes, I was going to be the different one. Yes, I was going to be the one with an accent. I might as well make that what was interesting about me. So I would say that's a big shift for me. What's different about you, to turn it into your unique differentiator, and take the opportunity to really savor the fact to start with a clean slate. Bring the best version of you. You can take stock of what was working for you, and the self-awareness part comes in there. here you have a completely new environment to bring the best, or to even try. Sometimes you fake it till you make it with new things, new practices that we've introduced in our life. Well, this is an opportunity to put those into action. So it's definitely a journey, but definitely as an immigrant you are confronted with that. Sometimes I'm very blessed to be fortunate that languages come very easily for me, but I know those that struggle more with that part, that tends to be a major barrier. Then again, it's all a question of perspective. I can tell you that as a volunteer, I do many talks like this one, and particularly to professional associations and with different groups, particularly Latinos. And many times it would break my heart to see people struggling so hard to apply for a job, let's say like a bank teller in a new country. And it seems like for a local, that's not necessarily a very high level job, but for an immigrant, that's a very difficult job to get because your language skills are put into question. Your, is your CV going to stand out in the pile? Is your accent going to be a problem because you are customer facing? And then I would say to them, what if instead you apply to a big hotel chain or a big tech company that does business abroad, where your value is gone up immediately if you do that? So I've always tried to kind of help people, let's change that lens and let's see where you can bring more value from the get-go, being exactly who you are. Because sometimes you hear the wrong advice in this sort of, I've lived in some countries where sometimes I've seen the immigrant communities sort of become like a little ghetto. And I think that's very unhealthy, because when you integrate professionally, you are a true member of society. And that's where you bring down things like racism and that, because you are part of the society. You don't isolate yourself. Sometimes people do it just because they don't have this information. That's why I'm so passionate about sharing it.
Wow, thank you so much. We've got folks writing in the chat box. I'm just going to flag some things folks are writing here. So Cristina writes, it feels like being uprooted regarding immigration. So it feels like being uprooted. Marcia writes, I'm originally from Brazil and moved to the USA 2 years ago, still learning how to be a part of this culture and trying to accept the fact that all experiences are making me a global citizen. And then Cristina writes in response to Marcia, it took me many years to adjust to life in Santiago, Chile. Be patient, you'll get there. Marcela, I'd love to hear your reflection on these comments.
Yes, I fully relate. And I love it that Marcia said the thing about becoming a global citizen, because again, it's perspective, right? Do you want to call yourself an immigrant or a fancy global citizen? One has charm, the other one implies loss or a weakness. So that's why I'm happy to see that reaction, because that's one of the things that makes me happy in these things. Like if that's the one thing I can have today in somebody's mind, I'm happy.
Yes, and language is so important. Actually, I was hosting a chat a couple of days ago where the speaker encouraged the listeners she's from Kenya, and she was speaking about artificial intelligence and how, there are a lot of discriminatory practices that happen, and we can dive into that. I definitely encourage you to watch that chat, but she encouraged her listeners to not think of, countries like Africa and certain countries in the world as third world countries, to think of them as either developing countries or the global south, which definitely changes the perspective of the conversation. So language is so important. And Marcela, I love that you're inviting us to think from a different lens and different perspective. So I love the camaraderie that's already happening in the chat box. So I'm just going to move to this question here that was submitted offline. How can we empower other colleagues to show their authentic self at work?
I think the only way is to lead by example. I mean, this is about how you present yourself and the persona, if you will, that you create at work. I'm big on two things when it comes to work, which is the self-awareness side about how do I want to feel every day and how do I want to be perceived. And I think if you take those two things into account constantly, you will be building trust. Because if you do things that are in alignment with your values, you're going to be happy. That already is somebody that people trust and admire because you conduct yourself in a certain way. And then if you want to be perceived, in my case, for example, for many years, I would have next to my computer the words professional, what's the other one? Collaborative and approachable, because as I moved up in the ladder, I wanted to make sure that my team never felt, because I'm not the smiley type. So that was an issue for me. So those three things were there. So every day I would ask myself, were you this way? But by doing that, you're building that trust that the others need in order to open up. But I still believe that you cannot force other people to take steps they're not ready to take. So all you can do is facilitate an environment where people are sparked into action rather than be pushed into it, because that might backfire.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, this is great for you to just bring it into perspective, right? And how do I want to be perceived? Again, that's empathy and social awareness and self-awareness and motivation. These are the pillars of emotional intelligence, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So if you know, I'm not a smiley person, and I know maybe this kind of culture really values that kind of, happy pippy smiley, but it's not something I'm giving. It doesn't mean that I am not, encouraging. I can't create, authentic community. So that is just I applaud you for doing the work on your own, because it comes from yourself and it comes from building a practice, right? The other thing is, I think people want to either press the button and they're able to kind of morph into this self-realize, this higher self of being able to perceive, show what they want other people to perceive and things like that. So again, it comes with practice, it comes with self-realization, and then checking in with yourself to make sure that you're actually practicing what you preach.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would like to add, because I am just concerned of the angle of some of the questions, it's also on you, not always on your employer, for you to do the work, as you called it. So for me, for example, I would find more growth outside of work, going back into my little world of philosophy and poetry, because that feeds my soul, that replenishes me, and then I can go back and face the world happier and be better at my work. My work might have nothing to do with poetry or philosophy, and I do believe the employer cannot guess that. They can facilitate some courses, but sometimes because of the HR structures, in my case, they'll send me to an advanced Excel thing because I'm not very techie. But I know that if I spend an afternoon reading poetry, I'll be much happier. So I will, not do that and figure that out. And I think it's very important to also have that personal responsibility so that you can shape your journey in the best possible way.
I love that. Thank you so much, Marcela. So I do have a private message here that I'd like to raise. So speaking about pivotal moments from a live caller, I had a pivotal moment when I did a 180 role change. I have learned and used new skills quickly. I found that while working with our dev team, that they weren't smarter, better, or superior. It was a game changer for me. Would you like to comment on that, Marcela?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that observation came, because this goes back to my thing about change is hard, right? And we are probably the ones that create these scenarios that don't necessarily exist. So then if we go back to the thing about how do you want to feel and how do you want to be perceived, well, it seems that she definitely had an epiphany in terms of whatever, negative scenario had been built, it wasn't necessarily the case. Now, sometimes it is that way, but then you can also challenge yourself to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So I'm very happy to see that.
And speaking of being a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, Philippa writes, the benefit of having differences that we can embrace is that we can embrace it, and that you can choose to become the bridge builder within your leadership and conversations. That seed of empowerment is powerful and influential and exactly where you are supposed to be.
I love that. And I love the concept of bridge building, because that's very much part of my life. I always think of that. I even visualize that as I do anything, or every time we're going to change countries, or every time I learned a new language. For me, it was just a bridge towards a culture that I wanted to be closer to, or be more respectful to, or welcomed into, or accepted into. So I very much relate to that. And I think at work is very important to think of with your colleagues and your whole environment. If you reframe that instead of thinking just office politics, which sounds so toxic, this is very good, because you can be the bridge builder on a daily basis. And actually, you end up being the biggest beneficiary of that.
Absolutely. I love that. I know we have a question coming up later about office politics, so we'll get into that in a minute. But I do want to hold us a little bit on, building a global perspective. So this question was also submitted offline.
Mhm.
How do you build a career with the global perspective? I want to live abroad and I feel I will need to start from scratch. Which aspects should we consider to build a wider professional trajectory?
I think it's no different than actually the only a local career, in the sense that, those basic things about expanding your network, making sure that you have those transferable skills. If it's abroad, that might involve also a language component. But at the end of the day, is the actions that you're going to take to position yourself from a global perspective. I think post-COVID, so many of the geographical barriers have been just disappeared. So this is a very good time to look at the world exactly as that, as a global marketplace in which you just have to see where what you have to offer is of use, or where could you be setting your sights on. I think there's two things that have always worked for me, is to become very much a researcher or a journalist, if you will, of that path that I want to follow. If it's going to be an international job, I want to really understand those markets. I want to understand who are the thought leaders, what are the main organizations in that industry. Can I play a role? Is there a professional association I can join? Do I need to take a new course? Can I do some volunteer work? Can I offer to shadow somebody? There's all this process where you need to identify the gaps and also understand that it is a marathon. So, you need to pace yourself. Also, because here we're very much talking about work and life, don't neglect the personal side. As I share in the introduction, I found a job because I was actually at an art gallery, which has nothing to do with the job I found, but that's what makes me happy. So if you're going to move abroad, don't think that you have to become who you're not. Sometimes your interest and doing things where you can be fully yourself, it's much easier to connect with people. So professional associations are great, but who knows, maybe a workshop on watercolor might lead you to things you never imagined. So be open to that too. And I don't think we have to go the old, it used to be before COVID, you have to join the local, I don't know, meetup group or whatever, and do the car salesman, card thing that we all lost after. Everything is changed now. So that means it's also, there's more opportunities. So it's up to you to make sure you are marketable. One thing that I would like to mention, though, because is make sure that you, in that process, are somebody who always has something to give or to offer. And I'll share something. I know Philippa is here. I can see her. So I'm just going to share a little bit about our interaction this week, because I was actually on a room on Clubhouse, and I was sharing a little bit about some challenges. And she was so generous that she offered to give me a session on confidence, which is what she does, and to sort of deal with a particular roadblock that I was struggling with. But then also, when I contacted her, I did let her know that I believe in reciprocity. And I said, I am a copywriter. Writing is my biggest talent. Is there anything I can do for you? Because I think it's not, you cannot be surprised sometimes if the job search or transition is not going well when you're just going at it as a taker. Nobody likes takers. So make sure you always have some way to offer, even if that person doesn't take it, but offer to, I don't know, make an introduction, let them know about something. There's always something that you can give, but at least make an effort to establish the relationship from that perspective, because now people will remember you in a completely different way.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. That's also a part of the responsibility of, leaving the door open, right? And also bringing other folks through the door with you, so that there are, more spaces at the table where more diversity and inclusion can take place. And then, people are able to build more dynamic products and, be more socially responsible, be more aware that, there is diversity and there's beauty in diversity here. So I love that you're highlighting that. And I love that you all were able to exchange that. So actually, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the power of networking, and also just, how now, let's say that a lot of things are going remote, or hybrid at least. So how can people take advantage of the new way that people are beginning to work? Who knows what will happen, in what people are calling the new normal. I would also love to hear what you think about the phrase of that, the new normal. But how can folks take advantage of, new remote work or new hybrid work, and then, network online, to be able to reach a more global audience?
I think you just have to put yourself out there. There wasn't a better time than now. We have the technology that is available for all of us. We don't have to leave home. We don't even have to wear shoes if we don't want to. Nobody needs to know, so there's more platforms that we can think of. Like for me, as I said, look, Philippa is here today. I met her on Clubhouse 2 days ago. She's based in the UK. Like, who would have known that? I reconnected through LinkedIn with my friend Bushra, who's in Finland. My friend Christina, we talked last week in the US, but she's back in Chile because she's transitioning between the two. We did this sort of back and forth. How can we support each other? We had this exchange of ideas. And this is an ongoing process. And this is, I think, available for everybody to take stock. What you have, what do you want, what can you offer, and just keep the momentum going. I'm a big believer that the milestones will be hit if you keep going at things. You cannot just expect a result because you want it. You have to build up to it. So you have technology at your disposition. We have, for those that don't know about Power to Fly, what better platform to, have these opportunities, to have job postings, to have all sorts of other talks that we can go and research. So there is so much out there. It's just a question of going for it.
Absolutely. So everyone, your participation here is, a testament to that. And I love that you're able to transition these new connections that you're making on different platforms and to support each other. One of my favorite things that I feel it has come natural to me, and I see more and more people doing this, which I love, asking, how can I support you? And being true about that. What can I offer you? This is an exchange. Let's think of this as a partnership. I can't just I can't expect to receive and never give any of my talents or my passions. So again, that comes with putting yourself in the other person's shoes, right? So maybe later there is like a nice connection that can happen because of that, or maybe we're able to learn something, which 9 times out of 10, we learn something new from these new connections. I'm just going to flag some things folks are writing here in the chat box. There was no way for me to have the chance to network if everything was still in person. We have another comment here. I love that. Keep the momentum going. I envision riding the wave and bringing each other along for the ride. Beautiful, beautiful analogy, Jen. Great. Okay, so let's move on to another question here. This is more of a personal question for you, Marcela. So as a multilingual professional with 5 languages under your belt, which language makes you feel at home? Do you feel different with each? For example, they say English is a business language and Spanish is the love language. With which culture do you feel connected to the most?
The thing is, I made some notes, so I'm looking through it there, because the thing is that because I learned different languages very young, my brain is evolving to some sort of language Wi-Fi. So I just latch on to the one that is around me. And that's the language that I think and speak in. Even if I have an accent, I just developed into that, right? So I will give you what I associate more with each language so that you know at least what my experience is. So when I speak Spanish, obviously it's my first language. It's all family, a warmth, connection. That's what it brings for me. English for me is obviously a business language. It's very strategic, but I find it so empowering because it's so precise. So I absolutely love it. French, probably closest to my heart. Share my life with a Frenchman. Maybe that has something to do with it. It's elegant, it's poetic. It's all about philosophy and literature and all those things that just make me happy. Italian, I'm obsessed with the Renaissance. I always think of myself as a Renaissance woman. So I absolutely love the sort of artful and passionate side of it. And then Portuguese, I speak Brazilian Portuguese. I love the musicality, the sensuality, that sort of sexiness about it. So depending on where my Wi-Fi is, you see little bits of me that kind of, go with the language.
Wow, what a beautiful activity to do for yourself. I don't know if this question prompted that or if you already had that in mind, but I love to hear your reflection on that.
Yeah, it sometimes it comes up because it's, it's for people, they think of, you must have worked really hard at this language thing. And I don't even remember doing so. And, what I know is that I learned a particular language that opened a door to be closer to people and places that I really wanted to understand and experience. So I look at it that way.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Okay, so moving on to Philippa has also shared a pivotal moment for her. So she writes here in the chat box, my pivotal moment came with a career change and deciding to leave a legacy in an impactful way by creating a revolutionary leadership and empowerment program that created opportunity into leadership roles, a transition in the top heavy management style to a coaching style, lean in circle groups to support women. It was designed to impact 100 women. In the end, it impacted 26,000 people. Amazing. Marcela, I'd love for you to respond to Philippa's comment here.
I can see now why we connected. This was really meant to be. That means we're both in this path of helping others. I'm telling you, you were not there, the rest of you, but I was in this clubhouse room and I just asked this one question, and her voice, before she even said anything, I just knew. So now I can see that we just share this need to do more for others, and that's where we get our happiness. So congratulations to what you've done, because I'm so happy that we bonded, and I'm so looking forward to getting to know more about you and support you in those things that you're doing, of course.
Wow. Yes. Philippa, feel free to drop any links in the chat box so we can support you now. Let's put some of these things into practice now. So Marcela, in the meantime, let's move on to this next question here. So I'd love for you to also reflect on just, current state of humanity as you respond to this question. Mm-hmm. So this question reads, how do you manage career transitions when you can't afford to start all over with a lower income?
Oh, that's a tough one. I have had career transitions very much guided by what I wanted to do. I've also had career transitions that were purely fear-based, and because I actually needed to pay for the braces for my daughter. As simple as that. So I understand that. I know what that feels like. But sadly, the market determines what you will be paid. So rather than, I feel the wording lets me know that there's some personal work that needs to be done in terms of facing those roadblocks. It seems to me, based on the way it's written, that there's some perceived negative outcomes before going through. I have been able to do this changing countries, as I said, being the new one, the one that didn't even know what the industry I was working in was about. I managed. That doesn't mean it was easy and it was fun and Emily and Power thing. No, I went home dealing with imposter syndrome, reading about, telecommunications technology and words that I've never heard in my life, trying to make sense of it. It's tough. It's tough out there, and there's people for whom this is their profession. So you are in a very competitive environment. So rather than look at it as this war that you're going to have to fight, do some internal work first, and then see how you can approach this new market. A lot of times this comes up, I find, with women who've been out of the workforce for a few years. One of my, the things that I get back to them is, I've worked with a lot of MBAs, and I say it, and I swear when I say this, being a parent is far more useful, because it's the same skills put to practice. You manage 1,000 things with the small budgets, and everything has an impact, and everything can go wrong and everything can go right. So if you can manage a household, if you can manage personal relationships, you can definitely transfer that onto work. But you need to maybe work more on your portfolio and get the right contacts. Again, go back to what Philippa nicely brought, that bridge building process. Don't focus on the roadblocks, build your bridges.
Beautiful. Yes, because otherwise we're building walls when we don't necessarily mean to build walls, right? We're kind of putting ourselves into a corner, and then we feel like, we don't have what it takes. And then, all of the mental things that come with that, downplaying your own talents, imposter syndrome. And the truth is that one of the silver linings to, everything that has happened in the past year is that, things are going more work is becoming remote or hybrid, at least, mm-hmm. which means, we have new areas that we can experiment with and explore, so that folks can either, learn a new trade or contribute in another way. I love that when you're your introduction, you mentioned that, you dove into the tech world without being a technologist, say, but I've learned after speaking with, hundreds of people on different topics that actually it's important to not just have the techie person doing the techie things. We need people who come from a completely different background, who come from, let's say musical background, and then they become a developer, and what a beautiful transition and what a beautiful bridge that can even bring to the product and to the teamwork and all of that. So I definitely echo your sentiment there. All right, so let's move on to this question here. Do you believe there's an age limit for career pivots? I'm 45 and I've always wanted to work in tech, but I'm starting to believe it's a bit too late.
No, there isn't, because I'm proof that that's not the case. If they hire me, I was younger when they hired me the first time in tech, but I literally didn't know what telecommunications meant. So if we go by those standards, now I had other things, and that's why you need to figure out what are those other things that you can bring to the table. What experiences have you had that you can leverage for this new role? So I don't think this is an age thing. To me, this goes back to the mental roadblocks that you are telling yourself, this scenario that you're building. You need to face that, write it down. That usually helps to try and identify what is it, what can you do for the bridge building? Do you need to learn more about that industry? Do you need more connections? Can you start asking people to introduce you to some of those people? Can you do some volunteer work in that field? There's so many things you can be doing, but age is not a problem. And also, and Mariela, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that just a few weeks ago, Power to Fly had a whole conference dedicated to women over 40 about entering the workforce or re-entering the workforce. So nowadays, there's opportunities for everyone. Is what do you tell yourself that determines more than anything how you will be received?
Absolutely. So yes, return to work. Some folks want to take a break to do whatever, to travel the world, to raise a family, to pick up another skill, and then they come back to the workforce. And of course, time has passed after that time. And so it's like, this question of, am I able to return to workforce or even get a new skill after not having, been in that role for so long, or not having been in that role. So I agree with you that age ain't nothing but a number. And as you started in the beginning, that, time is a continuum, change is always happening. And so to ride the wave of change, no matter how old you are, I mean, the beautiful thing also about technology, as much as it can limit us in certain respects, but we have to create our boundaries so that don't, let our personal time get sucked up by being on tech too long. That's a whole nother conversation. But the beautiful thing about technology is that, we can learn things quickly. We, if we have the desire, it's literally at our fingertips that we can search and we can connect with folks. We have about 15 minutes left. So I just want to make sure that we're putting some of these things into practice. For our live callers, if you are interested in connecting with some of these folks who are joining us live, feel free to drop in the chat box your LinkedIn or your website, or any social that you prefer to be connected with here. Just drop that in the chat box, and let's start to practice some of this support here now. So maybe I encourage you all to maybe reach out to at least 2 people that are writing their links in the chat box. I know that for some it's not as easy to put themselves out there, and don't worry if your LinkedIn isn't updated. Don't worry if you're not on so much. I think the important thing is to take that step. So we also have Christina here, who has written, I am 49 and will be entering the workforce in August, hopefully after moving back to the US. Do you have any comments for Christina there, Marcela?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Christina, we had a really nice conversation, and I'm happy to kind of go a little bit more on that. I think Christina was a good example of just assuming sometimes that where you've been before doesn't have value, but that's what I was saying to her. It depends where you take this, and also look at the opportunity to explore all possible avenues. If you're going to make a change, make sure it's going to be a change for the better. So are there any personal interests that you have that you can, maybe channel into working for a nonprofit instead of just being an employee as a regular office job? There's all these things that you can be doing in this process. So I would say never rush it. Use it as an opportunity to start with this clean slate, bring the best of you out, and focus on that bridge building every day, because this is it's a long process, but I'll be supporting you along the way. Now you have all these new connections over here, so we'll get there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that encouragement, Marcela. And thank you also for, everyone writing in the chat box and sharing your links for your preferred way of connecting. We've got a little over 10 minutes left, so I do want to touch on some questions that you all have submitted offline. But again, if anyone has anything that comes to mind before we end this session, I would love to hear from you. So just write your questions or reflections in the chat box. Until then, let's move on to this question, Marcela. So this was submitted previously. What's the best way to manage team dynamics and office politics while also showing a more vulnerable and emotional side?
Yeah. So I think I touched a lot on that when I was talking about how you want to be, how you want to feel, how you want to be perceived, and how you conduct yourself on a daily basis. It's people will mirror your actions as well, so you need to keep that in mind. So I won't go as much in that because I think that the office politics are debunked once you start looking at this bridge building lens looking at things through the bridge building lens opposite this is office politics, this is toxic, I can't deal with it. So it's very much an internal shift that needs to happen. That doesn't mean that the environment will magically become great, but you can at least take care of what you can control, which is yourself. If anything, that will empower you to improve those relationships, build the trust, or you'll decide to leave because you'll be so confident and happy with who you are, and you'll take your amazing self somewhere else where you're valued. So, you have to look at things this way. I have learned that sometimes adding time to a very negative situation doesn't improve it at all. That's one thing I would have told my younger self. So there's that. On the emotional and vulnerable side, I would say be careful on that one. By vulnerable, you mean to be very open to, like I was never ashamed in many fields that I work to say, I'm not an engineer. I have no idea how this stuff works, but I am a great writer. I can speak in human words, and what I write, our clients understand. So, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me because I didn't have that background. On the other hand, the emotional side, I don't know exactly to what extent you mean, but I dealt a lot with this as a supervisor of millennials, and I don't know whether it is a generational thing. Seems to me that my age group, it was more about you keep all emotions out. I think that's too much. I think some of the millennials, they bring way too many emotions sometimes, and your employer is not your girlfriend, it's not your mom. They cannot pay attention to every emotional need that you have. You have to take care of yourself in that. I managed with this as a supervisor by kind of turning the roles where sometimes if people were bringing way too many emotions, I would ask them, how would they feel to be in my position if everybody brought so many emotions? And also, are you bringing emotions because you want to vent, or are you bringing emotions because you're having a tough time? And as a responsible adult and professional, you're saying, hey, I need some help. I need a minute. This is impacting my work, but I really care about my work. But right now I'm having a tough time. Nobody's going to turn away from you if you do that. But again, your employer is not your girlfriend. So pay attention to that. And remember that everything that you say is out there for people to use at their disposal. So my personal advice is emotional stuff, try and keep it with family until you work through things. If it's not impacting your work, don't raise it, in the middle of a meeting. It might backfire.
Absolutely. And that's that self-awareness component, right? And self-regulation, which is another pillar of emotional intelligence, how we can manage our emotions instead of just, throwing them out, getting overwhelmed and, feeling burdened and then throwing that on other people. I love that you said, your boss is not your girlfriend or you can't just vent on everything. I mean, unless you've worked that dynamic out, but understand that is not the best scenario to be in. I love that you're proposing that. So I have another here. I'd love for you to kind of, if you can, continue the wave into, how managing our, and by managing, I don't mean controlling, right? I just mean being aware of it, being in your emotion, and then taking a pause so that you're not just fueling everything with that emotion after. So let's kind of bring it into cultural differences as well. So this question was submitted offline. I am a Latina in IT, and there's a cultural difference in how I handle situations. Yeah. How can I better communicate my handling of issues so I can get more trust from my team?
Yeah, This one, I really resonated with that because this was my reality many years ago. So again, remember, I'm not a coach. I'm somebody who shares their own path in terms of what worked for me. I would say that you need to identify what exactly is that roadblock, name it, write it down. We need to understand what this monster, imaginary or real, is so that we can deal with it. A lot of times, and I'll go by stereotypes of Latinos, let's say we are not as good at speaking up, we are less competitive. And sometimes in these environments where in the IT world or the tech world where I was, there are procedures and forms and processes to follow for everything. It's extremely rigid. And sometimes that's a little bit of a disadvantage for us because we come across a little bit as a people pleaser, and we are the reliable one that doesn't get any credit. If that's the scenario, then that's part of the process again, where you need to figure out what will you need in order to become more assertive. Is it a personality thing? Is it that you need to reach out to maybe another colleague that can be your sort of wingman to help you get a little bit more visibility? Do you need to practice more before your meetings so that you have some canned responses of what you're going to say? Start interjecting, start small and build that from it. There's no shame in it. Nobody's born knowing what to say. If you bond better with people by inviting others to lunch, then do that. Particularly in the IT world, what worked for me is I became the queen of the lessons learned meetings. Why? Because I am more of an introvert. I don't think of the best thing the first time I hear it. I need my time. So I started volunteering. First, I started volunteering a bullet point for that agenda. As my career progressed, because I was in management, I was leading that agenda, and I went from reactive to proactive. And what I did is, especially with sometimes, don't take it all on yourself too. I had some very mean colleagues as well in some places. So I would just challenge the company or the bigger team to make sure some of the milestones were also things that matter to me, like keeping the team morale up. Because sometimes you have prima donnas that bulldoze through everybody, but it has a cost in terms of the whole team morale and performance. So I learned to make sure that those things were part of the discussion. So the lessons learned was a great space for me to volunteer to put that report together. I did it really nice, and it was sort of the analytics and the sort of, like the other milestone more on the human side that I needed. It was very empowering for me. So the process helped me to get a lot of confidence. My colleagues started to use that. It was funny because then they would come to my office before the meeting and they would ask me, could you put this in, but don't tell the others it's from me. So, that was a tool I found. I'm sure you can find your own, but you need to identify what it is. What is causing that discomfort so that we can manage it? And there's nothing wrong with, like I said, fake it till you make it, ask for help, team up with others, come up with solutions. There's always a way.
I love that. I love the advocacy that you generated just by stepping up and going above and beyond. So my follow-up question would be, how can someone be sure that they aren't overextending themselves in the situation so that all of a sudden they have, several hours of work because they're volunteering, they're trying, because you seem to have a good, awareness of your boundaries, but for folks who, might want to just overgive and they end up working overtime and, being burnt out, how can they avoid that?
I think it's just don't volunteer to do things that are not within your current scope of work. Start there. Because the thing about being more proactive than reactive is that it's an opportunity to become absolutely exceptional at your job. This is why it's so empowering, because when you do that, you have the confidence to, let's say if you are in a toxic environment, somebody else will offer you a job. Somebody will spot you, but you need to work on that zone of brilliance of yourself. So don't take on it doesn't mean that you're going to be somebody's assistant all of a sudden. It's about how also it benefits what you're doing currently. It's only by focusing on those building blocks that you'll be able to get to the next level, because by doing so is the confidence that will shine. So don't take on more than it's within your scope. Because the example that I gave about taking that role in the lessons learned meetings, I started just by, saying a few words about my participation in a particular project and how, let's say certain behaviors of lack of feedback of a particular team at a time was generating roadblocks and how that was delaying the project. So I didn't have to add more tasks to it. I simply brought awareness to certain things that were important to me, but I framed them within the context of what's beneficial for everyone.
Beautiful. So this is such great knowledge that you're sharing. And you did mention a little earlier if you could tell your younger self some things, but I would love for you to dive in deeper, because there is an actual question here that says, if you could give advice to your younger self that was just moving to France, which would this be? Maybe you can pick one, or you can dive into several pieces of advice.
I would say that two things. It's that imposter syndrome never goes away, but building confidence is the best antidote. So just go for it, and make sure that within reason you never make, or attempt never to make, fear-based decisions. That's something I definitely had to improve on, and it's been a lifelong journey. A lot of that had to do with me being a single mom very young, and bills needed to be paid and so on. So I did make a lot of compromises many times, but with time I've learned that sometimes the price you pay in terms of yourself, it can be a little bit too much. So you do what you have to do, but you're always seeking growth and that fulfillment. So I think now I look back to that younger self, and I'm a little bit more compassionate with her, because she's just trying to do what she could with what she had.
Yes, that's beautiful. So what can we look forward to for the future for you, Marcela? How can we support? We've got about 2 minutes left, so I'd love for you to leave us with some food for thought and remind us how we can stay connected when we end this conversation.
Absolutely. So lots of exciting things happening with me. Obviously, since transition and evolution is very much who I am, instead of starting one business after my corporate career, now I've started two. So I'll share with you what that is. And by all means, if you want to support me, once you understand what they are, I'm looking for opportunities to be a speaker, a podcast guest, and raise more my visibility right now. So those two things are, I'm a copywriter. I work with brands and individuals who are very unique, who want to have an online presence that is very much aligned to this full self that we've been talking about. So I absolutely love to work one-on-one with people and make sure I personalize that presence. So that's one of my business, which is called Presence Atelier, where I do a lot of one-on-ones kind of like this. And we go over what are the roadblocks, how can I help you? And then I take that into their social media presence. And then I have this other passion project that is evolving into a business now, which is it's called Mood by Marcela, but it's a series of virtual events all about culture, sensuality, and femininity. So this I share more about my personal journey, learning about those things, what it's been like, what I've learned from different cultures, why it's so important for me to always engage the five senses in everything I do, and how being feminine I don't feel is a weakness, but is one of my strengths. So I do this sort of like 1 hour virtual workshops where we discuss that. I have, for example, just to give you a little bit of what one is like, I talk about flamenco, but I talk about how this is an art form that improves your art of expression. You can be a woman, you can be fierce, you can be feminine. I walk you a little bit through the history. I give you some tips of how to keep that mood, if you will, after the experience. So I'm doing those things. So if you know of yourself, or you know of anybody that is interested in that, I just want to get my message out there, and obviously connect on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Clubhouse a lot talking as well. So yeah.
Beautiful. I love how you are naming your projects. Mood Marcela, that sounds fantastic. I'm definitely going to check that out. And then Presence, I love that as well. You are workshopping mindfulness and self-awareness and fierceness. So thank you so much, Marcela, for everything that you've shared with us today. Thank you everyone who has joined us live. And we will find you on social medias and support the great work that you're doing, Marcela. And in the meantime, we'll see you all on the next chat. Take care.
Thank you so much.